As a kid, I can remember when I misbehaved. One of the worst punishments my parents could do was banish me to my room. The length of time really depending on the seriousness of my crime. It seemed that every want and desire I had while being punished was related to something or some activity that was just outside my room. The hours seemed like days, and the time spent locked in my room was unbearable. When I look on these horrible days of my childhood, I can't even believe what the big deal was. If I hadn't been in trouble, I most likely would have spent my free time in my room anyways. Who is kidding? Locked in a room with my TV, all my books, toys, and Game Boy? Who could possibly consider being confined like that as punishment? I should turn my lights on. Okay. I was ingrained into my room for more than a week, but I can see a resemblance to the animals that are locked up in their enclosures at the zoo. While their rooms have most of the same things that their natural habitats have, it is the thought that they do not get to leave when mom or dad has finally broken down and absolved them of their crime. This is their life for the foreseeable future. They haven't misbehaved, and they certainly did nothing worthy of being punished for. What right do we have to exert our authority over other non-human species? Shouldn't animals be afforded the same basic rights as you and I? It is my belief, and despite their professed concern over animals, that zoos are made more of a collection of interesting items than total havens for simulated habitats. Zoos teach people that it is acceptable to keep animals in captivity, bored, cramped, lonely, and far from their natural homes. More than 2,000 years ago, the philosopher Aristotle wrote that men were by nature superior to women and that slaves lived for the sake of their masters. A century later, the Greek Stoic Chrysippus claimed that horses and oxen existed so they could labor for us. It is the belief that non-humans and animals are somehow made for our benefit and that causes us to treat animals the way we do. Zoo conditions can range from being fairly accurate, though drastically smaller versions of the animal's natural habitat, to cold, sterile cages where little thought or feeling for the animal's mental or physical condition is given. Animals who naturally live in large herds or family groups are often kept alone, and their natural hunting and mating behaviors are virtually eliminated by regulated feeding and breeding regimens. Because of their close confinement, animals get little to no mental or physical exercise. If it were not enough to take animals and keep them in captivity, many zoos over the years have been cited for numerous violations of animal cruelty to the animals entrusted in their care. In December 1999, a video was exposed that showed Sissy, an elephant in the El Paso Zoo, restrained by all four legs and repeatedly beaten by zoo workers with large wooden bats. Soon after the video was released, the El Paso City Council voted unanimously to allow Sissy to retire to an elephant sanctuary in Tennessee. The zoo director was forced to resign, and the USDA changed the zoo curators and violators with the Federal Animal Welfare Act, which the zoo decided to settle outside of court. The life of boredom that goes along with captivity often causes animals to engage in abnormal and self-destructive behavior known as zoochosis. The website of the World Wide Words describes the term. Many animals, especially the large carnivores, become deeply depressed, even psychotic, as the result of captivity. Symptoms of zoochosis include nervous pacing, head rocking, and self-mutilation. The problem is perhaps most accurate with polar bears, which have proved especially difficult to keep sane, and which often show disturbed behavior such as swimming for hours in small circles. The Central Park Zoo in New York had to call in an animal psychologist to find ways to give its polar bear, Gus, a more varied and challenging environment. A couple years ago, I made a trip to New York. My family and I decided to take a day to visit the Staten Island Zoo. There was a petting zoo where children could feed and interact with various animals like deers, goats, and horses. They had a cool reptile house with a wide variety of lizards and snakes. There was even an African safari exhibit showcasing many of the wild animals from Africa, such as monkeys, lions, and tigers. With all these animals behind its doors, you might think that the zoo sounds pretty big, right? I recently discovered that the Staten Island Zoo, which opened its doors in 1936, is built on only 8 acres of land. Yeah, only 8. That is not a lot of land for a zoo that hosts over 637 different animals. One of the first things I saw at the zoo was this huge 10-foot tall cage just a little past the entrance of the zoo. Inside the cage were two beautiful snowy white owls who somehow seemed oblivious to the cars driving by not even 20 feet away. The sign outside the cage gave very little useful info, and the only thing I learned is that these owls are so far from their natural habitat. I then made my way to the reptile house. Upon entering, the first animals on display were small turtles, lizards, and snakes in tanks no bigger than a shoebox, which were placed inside an artificial rock wall to give them the appearance of being a natural exhibit. Beside nameplates next to each animal's cubicle, there was no info to help me better understand these creatures and where they came from. Are they endangered? What about the information on these animals? The alligator exhibit held 4 gators in a space no bigger than a small office. The zoo curators seemed to have gone the extra mile for detail by painting the walls swimming pool blue. Just like that in the Everglades, right? I looked for one of those secret doors that would allow the gators to go to a different holding area, but there wasn't one. Next is the leopard habitat. I have always been fond of these beautiful cats and was really excited to see them. I wish I could say I was surprised at the smallness of this large feline's habitat in the zoo. While it was one of the largest exhibits in the zoo, it was still 1/1000th of the size of their natural habitats in the wild, in Africa and Asia. The leopard habitat did have a lot more work and money put into it. That was easy to see, but the animals just lay there looking bored out of their minds as children yelled and cameras flashed in their faces. While the cause to save endangered animals is a noble and necessary one, it is the trade-off that animals are sentenced to live in an alien environment that bears no resemblance to their natural habitat. Is this acceptable? Ultimately, the only way to save endangered species and in turn eliminate the only useful purpose of a zoo is to save their habitats and address the reason why people are killing them. Groups such as Born Free Foundation, an international wildlife charity, believes that wildlife belongs in the zoo and is dedicated to the conservation of rare species in their natural habitat and is phasing out of traditional zoos. Born Free works to change animals' lives for good, to investigate cruelty and neglect, and to raise awareness about wildlife issues. Animal rights groups such as PETA, while often extreme in their views and methods, work tirelessly to expose zoo abuses, which result in media exposure and worldwide concern and action. As a result of research I've done and all the things that I've experienced, I believe that the public and everyone who has a love for animals should get involved. You can support the banning of zoos by donating to these organizations and those like it, or by visiting a sanctuary that is a true safe haven for animals.